Good afternoon, everyone. I am Councilmember Brooke Pinto, Chairwoman of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety. I would like to call this meeting of the committee to order. Today is Wednesday, May 8th, 3:55 p.m. We have a quorum today with the presence of at-large Councilmember Anita Bonds, at-large Councilmember Christina Henderson, Ward 6 Councilmember Charles Allen, and a special guest visitor, Ward 5 Councilmember Zachary Parker. We have one item on the agenda today, the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety's recommendations on the fiscal year 2025 proposed budget for the agencies within its jurisdiction. As chairwoman of this committee, I take very seriously the responsibility that we have to focus on legislative proposals and budget investments that will allow our agencies to deliver safety, to deliver justice, and to support the foundational well-being of our communities across the district. In 2023, we experienced a particularly violent and fatal year in the district, a year with 274 people lost to homicide, more than any other year in over 2 decades, a 39% increase in violent crime, and a 24% increase in property crime. We heard resounding calls from residents, businesses, visitors, and leaders across government clamoring for improved safety in all of our neighborhoods. With feedback and input from thousands of residents, stakeholders, and safety partners, the district government came together unanimously to take decisive action to address safety by passing my Prioritizing Public Safety Emergency Amendment Act in summer of 2023, and passing my Secure DC Omnibus Amendment Act this winter. These bills included over 100 initiatives that closed critical gaps across the district's criminal legal system and expanded opportunities for prevention and government coordination to promote safety in all 8 wards. I am encouraged that as of today, more than 4 months into 2024, violent crime has decreased by 25%, and property crime has decreased by 14% when compared to the same period last year. While the year-to-date trends are promising and suggest that the legislative interventions and budget investments that the committee and council passed last year have already made positive impacts on safety in our communities, it is critical that the district stays collectively focused on a broad array of interventions, initiatives, investments, and responses to keep all residents safe today and over the long term. Fundamental safety for all residents undergirds all of the other goals and hopes that we are working to accomplish in our city. As a committee, it is our obligation to continue striving to support efforts to keep all district residents safe and invest in programs and strategies that will prevent crime before it occurs, create opportunity and hope for neighbors, and ensure that all of our agencies have what they need to protect and serve our city. Today, I'm putting forward the budget recommendations for the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety that demonstrates our commitment to making substantial investments that balance responsivity to community members, residents, advocates, businesses, and stakeholders, and that meets urgent needs across government and community-based organizations throughout our public safety and criminal legal ecosystems. The investments I'm putting forward today on behalf of the committee focus on 3 main goals. First, improve safety immediately across the district and support our first responders. Second, enhance accessibility, fairness, and oversight of the district's justice system. And third, bolster the foundational needs of neighborhoods to provide for sustainable and long-term thriving and safe communities. The budget I am putting forward today meets our urgent public safety needs and supports our first responders by protecting and funding all of the Metropolitan Police Department's needs to promote safety in our communities and continue to support officer hiring and retention efforts, including by establishing a new community safety ambassador program, which will include unarmed civilianized officers who will enhance MPD's presence and relationships within our communities and provide administrative supports for our sworn officers. Provides $841,000 to establish a FEMS paramedic school and assist a partner university in the accreditation process. Supports the Office of Unified Communications to fill critical call taker and dispatcher positions, expand training, and improve and update needed technology. Provides $2.3 million to establish a district-wide Safe Commercial Corridors grant program created in Secure DC through the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice to provide resources for neighborhood-specific safety interventions in all 8 wards. Providing staffing in the juvenile section of the Office of the Attorney General to better manage the influx of juvenile cases that we have seen in the last several years. And expanding the private security camera rebate program for small businesses and SNAP-eligible households. Second, the budget enhances accessibility, fairness, and oversight across our entire justice system by endeavoring to restore absolutely critical funding that was cut from the proposed budget for under-resourced residents and survivors of crime through the Access to Justice Initiative, which provides legal support, services, and protection to prevent acute situations such as eviction and unemployment, and the Victim Services Grants, which ensures survivors of crime can access needed resources and supports through a continuum of care. Restoring funding for the Criminal Code Reform Commission to support its essential work to develop a fair, clear, and proportional modernized criminal code, and funding the implementation of the tenets of the Corrections Oversight Improvement Omnibus Amendment Act to expand the Correction Information Council's oversight capacity at the DC jail facilities and Bureau of Prison sites across the country that house incarcerated district residents. And lastly, the budget bolsters the foundational needs to provide for safe and thriving communities by providing $13.4 million for violence intervention within the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement to support community-driven strategies that interrupt cycles of violence and lay the foundation for a future and needed merger of the district's violence intervention programs. Investing $1.25 million to implement vital structured literacy training for our teachers to address the exceedingly low rates of reading proficiency and to improve literacy and life outcomes for our district students. Providing $10 million to support the Safe Passage program to ensure that our kids can get to and from school safely with consistent supports from trusted adults. Expanding the Office of Attorney General's Attend Truancy Reduction program to ensure that our kids have the supports they need to not only get to, but stay in class. And establishing a pre-arrest diversion task force from the Secure DC Omnibus to develop policy recommendations aimed at a more thorough and appropriate response for low-level offenses. I am very proud of the balance that we were able to strike in this year's budget to prioritize safety, justice, and community investments, particularly in a budget year that is challenged by declining property tax revenues and the expiration of federal pandemic-related supports. In addition to these environmental budgetary restraints, I will note that the budget process this year with the committee was extremely difficult. In the 11th hour, significant sources of recurring funds were decertified, which effectively cut the committee's available funds to less than 1/3 of our expected plan for funds that I had anticipated to put towards access to justice, victim services, and other priorities of mine and the committee members from other various bills and needs throughout the year. While the budget we put forward today still honors our commitment to bolstering these investments, I am intent and committed on working with all of my colleagues over the next few weeks to identify additional funding sources for these essential needs. Without sufficient funding for access to justice and victim services, our entire community suffers, and we must all commit together to restore more funding for these vital programs. I want to thank my colleagues who transferred funds to the committee to support critical initiatives. Councilmember McDuffie and Councilmember Henderson for enhancing funding to access to justice grants. Councilmember McDuffie for enhancing funding to victim services. Councilmember Allen for providing funding to OAG to support the Attend Truancy Program and prosecution of the STEER Act. Councilmember Nadeau for enhancing funding for the Department of Forensic Sciences. And I want to thank Councilmember Parker for your continued partnership on these important priorities, including the expansion of safe passage. I also want to thank Chairman Mendelson for his important partnership on the committee's investment in literacy training for kindergarten teachers. We know that a safe and thriving city depends on the next generation having opportunities. And to make sure that that is true, we need to teach our kids how to read. That is fundamentally important. Together, we can continue to make strides to fulfill what I believe to be our greatest responsibility as a government, which is to provide for the safety and well-being of all of our communities. I want to recognize each of the members of this committee and your wonderful teams. Councilmember Bonds, Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Allen, and Councilmember Gray. I really appreciate all of your partnership and work with us over the last several weeks in developing these budget recommendations and thinking creatively about how to accomplish our shared goals. And I really appreciate how leaned in you all have been in this effort. Before we turn to a vote, is there any discussion? I will turn to my at-large council member and member of the committee, Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Pinto, and thank you so much to you and your staff, staff of the Budget Office for the work that went into preparing this budget. As you noted in your opening comments, I think everyone was sort of feeling the difficulty of not having so many federal funds available to us to fund some of the priorities that we all have, that communities have outlined, and that many, many people who've come to testify before this committee and others have expressed. I just want to highlight a couple of things. First, I want to thank you for mentioning the transfer from the Committee on Health. I know this transfer wasn't finalized until you circulated your budget report, but the $100,000 for Access to Justice initiative. But I hope that prior to the committee report being filed, that it could be amended to reflect that change. I believe in the work of the organizations who do that direct service with district residents each and every day, and I was glad we were able to support them in this way. I also want to highlight a $400,000 transfer from the Committee on Health within the opioid abatement settlement funds to the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner's illicit drug surveillance program. This funding will sustain the OCME's forensic toxicology testing capabilities and support the development of innovative forensic testing methods. These tests provide very crucial data and information on suspected opioid-related fatalities, enabling agencies to strategize and respond effectively to the opioid crisis. Without this work, a comprehensive understanding of the role of opioids and other toxic substances in the district fatalities would be unattainable. And so I actually want to thank Dr. Diaz at OCME and his staff for working with us to make sure that we were transferring the appropriate amount of money to ensure that this very, very important work in our larger fight against substance use disorder in the district continues. I'd also like to thank you for transferring $771,000 to the Committee on Health to be used to establish a smoking cessation fund in the Department of Health. These funds are coming from the Juul settlement account in the Office of the Attorney General and will be used to educate youth about the dangers associated with smoking and vaping in accordance with the terms of the Juul settlement agreement. I was also glad to see the committee maintain programs and positions critical to community health and safety, such as the FIMS paramedic school, restoring some of the FTEs that the mayor proposed cutting in the Office of the Attorney General's criminal division, restoring some of the victim services funds, and new 911 dispatchers and call takers in the Office of Unified Communications. I wholeheartedly agree with the committee's recommendations that OUC consider the impact of higher salaries and better benefits to hiring and retention outcomes. And I do hope that the FY26 budget that the mayor proposes next year for OUC does include funding for higher salaries, as well as a recategorization of these jobs as emergency response positions as they are. I also agree with some of the policies with the policy recommendation that the committee is making with regards to the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement. With regards to the Office of the Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, the Office of the Attorney General, and the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice to pursue some type of memorandum of understanding with regard to universal training and support for violence intervention workers and grantees in the district. I think right now we have a couple of different agencies who are doing overlapping work, and I think that the communities can benefit from a streamlined conversation about how to move forward. I plan to vote and report in favor of this report today. And I again want to thank you and your staff for all of your hard work. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Councilmember Henderson. We'll turn to Councilmember Allen and then Councilmember Bonds.
Thank you very much. First off, thank you, Chair Pinto, for you and for your staff for the hard work every year. It's a difficult thing to put the budget together, to put the report together. So I appreciate the hard work. I think certainly in a difficult budget, there were devastating cuts that were proposed in this budget, but in particular within the judiciary agencies. And this would be a challenging budget, I think, for all of our committees, but in particular, I think that the committee is able to help make some progress in restoring much of the very big gaps that the council has been asked to restore. Still some work to do, but really I'm going to be supporting this, and I'm proud of the fact that this committee is helping restore many of that. I wanted to talk about a couple of items in this report and recommendations I really want to note, and thank you for several of the investments that have gone into this. First off, as has been mentioned, restoring $2.2 million to the Access to Justice Initiative. The mayor's proposed budget slashed the Access to Justice funding by 67%. That is devastating and catastrophic cuts. So we've got a nearly $21 million gap to fill. Identifying about $2.2 million, including the transfers from the Committee on Health and Committee on Business and Economic Development, I think is great. It's obviously not nowhere near enough, but I think it does help start to chip away at that. And I think that everybody on this dais recognizes that, and I'm glad to see that priority. I think we're all going to have to work to make sure this is lifted up as a main priority with the chairman to make sure that we can restore level funding for this. Every single dollar that we put into our Access to Justice program improves outcomes for our most at-risk neighbors. In practical terms, it helps keep our entire civil legal system afloat. So we've got to have significant investments in recurring dollars for our legal services community. I want to note that we also, in this committee, are restoring some of the investments in our victim services funding. Again, the mayor's proposed budget deeply cut victim services funding. I'd like to see funding at the full council to restore the entire local funds budget. But I think, again, the very important support included here around domestic violence service providers has got to be paired with that unrestricted enhancement for all victims of crime, as well as for our hospital-based violence intervention programs. So I look forward to working with you and the chairman to help ensure that we fill those public safety cuts. I also want to note we're maintaining the Criminal Code Reform Commission. Sunsetting the CCRC in July this fiscal year, I think, was a pointed and unnecessary move by the mayor. And I'm happy to see that you were able to identify the funding to restore this agency through FY25. Their work is nowhere close to being done. Not just on the revised criminal code, but on revising parts of the DC code that have been untouched. Environmental crimes, juvenile law, criminal procedure. They also provide comments, important comments, on bills that are before this committee and the council as a whole. And so I know that you intend to continue to rely on CCRC, as we all do, as we continue to work on public safety challenges. And it's top of mind for all of us. I'm glad to see that. I want to note one of the things I think that we had talked about a few weeks ago. I'm very happy to see that you've proposed a BSA subtitle to allow the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice to be able to issue grants to nonprofit organizations that seek to hire additional security personnel. There are a lot of global events happening at the same time, and the Deputy Mayor's office would now be able to provide assistance to nonprofit organizations that are at high risk of a terrorist attack or other extremist attacks. A lot of our current local and federal grants available just don't fit that need. And so I think we identified a gap, and I think this BSA language helps close that gap and provides that opportunity. So I want to thank you for doing that. Lastly, you noted this already, but I want to thank you for accepting 3 transfers from our committee. The first would fund 2 new OAG civil enforcement attorneys to bring cases against dangerous drivers as required under the STEER Act. And the second provides a case manager position for the Attend Truancy Reduction Program at OAG. The third provides additional funding to create a new priority area under the Safe Passages program between the Potomac Avenue and Eastern Market Metro stations, something that myself, all of our Ward 6 ANCs, our Ward 6 Board of Education member, the DC Public Charter School Board, have all long advocated for with the deputy mayors. And so I'm glad that we're going to get this done here in this. I did want to highlight just a couple of quick concerns. I had a couple of quick questions. First is a comment on the Department of Forensic Sciences. I am disappointed that you did not accept the transfer from my committee to fully fund and implement the Restoring Trust and Credibility to Forensic Sciences Amendment Act of 2022, which was unanimously passed by this council last council period. For some reason, I get a general sense of apathy or even antagonism from the executive when it comes to fixing the structural problems at DFS and our crime lab, and importantly, creating a structure to prevent us from backsliding back to where the agency was when its director and senior staff covered up evidence in a criminal trial. Both the United States Attorney and the Attorney General have been rather clear with the public that a big barrier to improving their papering and prosecution rates is the lack of oversight, accountability, and quality assurance measures at DFS. To put a finer point on the problem, I'm aware of at least one example in particular where it took MPD over a year to wait to get forensics analysis back and charge a suspect in a homicide in Ward 6. That means a suspect known to have committed the crime was out in the community for over a year evading accountability. Certainty of getting caught is the biggest deterrent mechanism, and the current situation of the lab is actively undermining it. The executive spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to conduct a root cause analysis in 2021 to figure out what could be done, either through legislation or management practices that would right-size and stabilize the lab. The legislation that I steered through the council incorporated almost all the proposed legislative reforms, as well as the best practices from the best forensics labs in our country. For some reason, we're just sitting on it. For all the talk the executive hates conducting studies and issuing reports that sit there and accumulate dust on the shelf, I don't understand what gives here. It's very frustrating that we have a solution crafted after years of diligent oversight and stakeholder engagement, and there's very little traction by the executive to actually right-size and stabilize this agency for success in the future. I've stated time and again, accreditation is an important milestone, but it is not a silver bullet. We are going to find ourselves back where we were unless the lab is depoliticized and has strong oversight structure like the Science Advisory and Review Board, where there are only now 2 members left who haven't resigned because, as the Washington City paper recently reported, the agency isn't taking them seriously and they don't have any power. Separately, just a couple of quick questions. I did want to ask about the transfer of the ONE's Leadership Academy to the Deputy Mayor's office. What this appears to do, but if Chair Pinto could expand on this a little bit, is it gives the Deputy Mayor's office more programmatic responsibility where in the past it had been left to the agencies. So I'm just trying to understand the motivation behind moving this out of the ONE's office and into the Deputy Mayor's office. Is there staff moving over with it? Is it still going to be serving 6 schools that it's in now? And don't understand yet, why does it need to be moved out of the ONE's office?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Allen, and thanks for your comments on the Department of Forensic Sciences. I would just say to this piece, I am sympathetic and share a concern that we have needed a lot of improvements for DFS. I would say things are different now than they were 2 years ago. Yes, in part because 2 of the units have regained their accreditation. Latent Fingerprints is on its way to being reaccredited. And I don't think that establishing an agency as an independent agency is necessarily going to help solve some of the problems. I think I worry that it would remove it even further from being able to provide the oversight that it needs.
If I can just,
Sure.
The issue in the independence was settled last spring with the BSA, so that independent language was struck out. So the issue in front of us is being able to fund the oversight of the agency, not the independence.
Okay.
Because I agree, we settled that last spring.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So in terms of the ONE's Leadership Academy, last year, as you know, Safe Passage was transferred out of the Deputy Mayor for Education's jurisdiction into the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice. And so the ONE's Leadership Academy is a similar thought that jurisdiction should be kind of handled together so that oversight could be streamlined, so that if there's communication challenges between school leadership or a Safe Passage worker or what's going on with those 6 schools, communication wouldn't have to go through another agency. The program itself is not set to be cut or changed in any way other than the oversight, and we're hoping that creates some streamlined opportunities to make ONE's Leadership Academy and our Safe Passage programs more effective and collaborative.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So the idea being that those 2 are just more streamlined. Okay. I'll admit being anxious about what's a very different programs and different target audiences, but I appreciate the rationale of trying to have those 2 things aligned in the Deputy Mayor's office. So thank you very much. I don't think I heard in this as well on a different question, is just so that we make sure we lay out for the record, when we look at MPD hiring, what is this budget proposing to be able to have in terms of sworn officers, senior police officers, and cadets that this budget would fund?
So this budget funds every position that MPD believes they can hire for this year, because we don't want to have additional, we want to make sure that that's fulfilled. So it would allow for 216 additional recruits, 40 transition cadets, 20 senior law enforcement hires, which would bring the sworn force up to 3,370. I will also say some of the other provisions, like the community ambassador program, for instance, will help take some of the pressure off of sworn officers for the overtime amounts that they need to do, and the kind of more administrative community-based tasks that don't need to be handled by a sworn officer, that we're also hoping leads to more people coming in the door. We have had more applications into MPD, more people. 3 of the last 6 months of recruitment classes have been a net positive for the first time since 2019. So I think the agency is heading in a sustainable direction to build the force back up.
Okay, thank you. I know that as of the last March report, we'd only had 117 sworn officers hired through the fiscal year to date. So just trying to make sure we see where the numbers are. I think that I agree with you that I think Chief Smith has done some improvements on the recruitment process itself, so that we have more candidates that are coming in. And I think obviously our pretty long investments in the cadet program, I think will also pay dividends as we start to see those cadets be able to roll over and become officers as well. So I appreciate that. Last question, the report mentioned that the budget is funding 2 FTEs at the Corrections Information Council to partially implement the Corrections Oversight Improvement Omnibus Amendment Act of 2022 the council had passed. But then there's some language in the report insinuating this is actually going to be pre-funding legislation that is yet to be introduced, and I didn't quite understand. The council unanimously passed the CIC and the DOC oversight reform legislation last session in collaboration with numerous advocates and the CIC. So what is the intent here?
Sure. So I think that this is a really important bill that I support almost all of. I think particularly making sure that there's the ability for the CIC to do unannounced inspections, to speak with residents and other stakeholders, and to have reports to the council about the conditions of the jail, to include CCB in one of the jail facilities that they have oversight over. There's a provision, well, there's 2 provisions actually that I disagree with. One of which sets the experience level of the executive director from 3 years to 10 years, which I don't think is a necessary change. I think that CIC is doing great work. And then the second is creating CIC as a completely independent agency. And right now there's a lot of collaboration between CIC and DOC and the committee, which helps lead to more improvements. And so we are going to be introducing a bill that is almost entirely the same as the CIC omnibus, but takes out that independence component. And this funding will then operationalize almost all of the omnibus.
Okay. So and I realize we're talking about legislation that has yet to be introduced, but you're going to be introducing legislation to remove the independence of CIC.
I will be introducing legislation that does almost all that the CIC amendment seeks to do, except for moving it out of the executive and into a completely independent agency, which I worry would undermine our ability to have the same structures of support that we can with every other executive agency.
Okay. Well, that's going to be a different day, so we don't have to worry about that for now. I will say I'd be concerned about removing CIC independence, given the role that they need, but that's not what's in front of us right now. So I appreciate that. And again, I look forward to voting in support of the committee's budget today, and appreciate you and your staff's hard work on this.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just want to be clear, we're not removing any independence that they currently have. The bill sets it up as an independent agency, separate and above from their current independence. Their current independence is very important. We just mean kind of structurally. But thank you very much. And thanks for your partnership, Councilmember Allen. I'll now turn to our at-large colleague and member of the committee, Councilmember Anita Bonds.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. And I want to start by thanking you and your staff for going so in-depth on this budget. that has generated these wonderful questions from my colleagues, because I know how difficult it is to work within this framework where we are charged with deciding the dollars and not really running programs. So it really is rewarding to see from the narrative that you provided that a lot of associations have been between your committee and your staff, and of course with the operating agencies. So I want to thank you for that. That's really necessary. Given where we are in the life of our city, we know that we are on the road to recovering from the pandemic and those associated systems that kind of are not where they were, let's say 3-4 years ago. And so we want to get back to having the resources that we're familiar with, but they may never come. And so when we look at the budget that you have prepared in the committee, I can say that I'm proud of it. Proud that we are able to keep the public safety front and center in the community. And in doing so, I think we are addressing one of the major needs of our community. I want to applaud you for approaching it in this manner. And I can't even imagine the number of hours it must have taken to reach this point. And I know that you've had the very capable background working with the budget office, the council budget office and staff. And I see that they don't look too disheveled today. So I know that it all happened. Oh my goodness. Now the hair goes all over the place. But I'm telling you, this has been one task. And I cannot say too much or too loud about the work that it has taken to get to this point. And I applaud you. And I say, let's try to move forward to the next step. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to commend all who have had a say in this budget. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Bonds, and I really appreciate all of our conversations about these issues, and should note that even on very late nights leaving this building, I still almost always see your car parked out front. So thank you. And now I'd like to turn to our special guest of today's committee, Councilmember Zach Parker.
Thank you, Councilmember Pinto. And to members of the committee, I wanted to defer to members of the committee before giving remarks. I want to thank you all for the work that went into this markup and continuing to champion public safety. I'm here because I am highly invested in matters of public safety and turning things around for our city and in Ward 5. There are many things to celebrate here, chief among them, investments in literacy. I agree with you. That will go a long way in making sure we set our young people on the right path, as well as investments in the Office of Unified Communications. I continue to think that there is a lot of work that we need to do to turn that office around, and I believe investments and recommendations that are included in this markup will move us there. That said, I did want to highlight one area of concern that continues to be an area of concern for me, and that's around the Safe Passage program. I've had conversations with you, Councilmember Pinto, as well as with Deputy Mayor Pia about the need to expand this program to Ward 5. We know in our city wards 8, 7, and 5 see highest levels of violence. And I'm of the mind that those wards where we're seeing the highest rates of violence should see more resources, more attention, and even our most experienced officers. And that is not always the case. While Ward 5 does have one sliver of the community that is covered by the Safe Passage program, the lion's share of our community is not. And I agree with the note here in your markup that there is work to do to improve the efficacy of the program. And there are recommendations and work underway to do just that as it's been transitioned to the deputy mayor. Even still, on the heels of a homicide at Brooklyn Metro, a shooting at Dunbar High School, routine acts of violence impacting our young people, again, in wards 5, 7, and 8. I would want to see a little bit more attention on these communities, and in particular in Ward 5 with the Safe Passage program. So here's my ask. I would ask members of this community, or committee rather, to work with me as this markup transitions to the committee of the whole to see what we can do. I did just speak, I spoke with you earlier, Councilmember Pinto, as well as to the deputy mayor. And the deputy mayor has expressed interest in working to see how we can expand this program. And as you have, Councilmember, and I look forward to working with you as we move forward. But all in all, I think we continue to move in the right direction in terms of public safety. As you noted, violence is on the decline citywide, as it is in Ward 5, but there's still a lot of work to do. So thank you again for having me.
Of course, we're welcome in the committee anytime. Councilmember Parker, and I really appreciate you lifting up the important work going on with Safe Passage. And I totally hear you and note the need to cover Fort Totten and other areas in Ward 5. We are going to be working very closely with the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice over the course of the year to make sure that our supports for Safe Passage have what they need for consistent training, infrastructure, and to make sure that there is more communication between what Safe Passage workers are seeing, hearing, experiencing with their students, and what school leaders are seeing, hearing, experiencing with their students, because these are whole people, our kids, and the issues that happen on the way to school don't end at the door, and vice versa. And so they need to be part of that network. But I look forward to working with you on that as well. All right. Any other discussion? Okay, thank you all very much. With that, I would like to move the fiscal year 2025 committee budget report with leave for staff to make technical, editorial, and conforming changes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. In the opinion of the chair, that is unanimous. Are there any opposed? Okay. Before we adjourn, I want to thank my really incredible team for all of your hard work, dedication, and commitment to these important issues. I know that you care very deeply about getting the answers right, about keeping an open mind and working extremely hard in furtherance of this important work. And I am so grateful that we get to do this together and really appreciate the big effort. That includes my Chief of Staff, Genevieve Hulick, Committee Director, Evan Maroff, our Legislative Director, Lynn Groft, our Committee Operations Manager, Akima Benjamin, Deputy Committee Director, Stephen Palmer, Legislative Counsel, Aloy Labrada Rodriguez, Legislative Policy Advisor, Anaya Mitchell, Communications Director, Victoria Casarubias, our Constituent Services Director, Brian Romanowski, our Legislative Counsel, Sean Jetner, our Legislative Counsel, Mason Grow, Constituent Services Coordinator, Pablo Velasco Rodriguez, and my scheduler, Maddie White. I also want to thank Zach Walter in the General Counsel's Office, Errol Spence, Ann Feltz, and Jen Budoff in the Council Budget Office, and Kate Blaniars in the Office of Revenue Analysis for their invaluable assistance in preparing this report. This report would really not be possible without all of you, including many very late night calls and work and efforts, especially with the decertification issues that we experienced over the last couple of days. So I really, really appreciate all that you all have done. Thank you so much. There being no further business before the committee today, the time is now 4:33 p.m. on Wednesday, May 8th. And